shot down 3 planes.
8 missions you were lucky, 10 somebody up there liked you, 25 was almost an impossibility.
The plane blew up and I got knocked out.
The Combat Air Crews Preservation Society presents Air Combat Journal. Today's journal entry is from World War II B-17 bomber Copilot Ray Schar. This is your Captain Mike Plank asking you to sit tight, strap in. Air Combat Journal is ready for takeoff. Chapter 1, a B-17 Copilot's Responsibilities.
There were a lot of duplicate responsibilities. In other words, to start with, the pilot and I would both circle the plane in the morning to make sure that nothing was visible on the outside that shouldn't be. And secondly, we ran the cockpit check, making sure all the gauges, everything was working. And we split the actual flying duties. In other words, to horse around a big plane like that, it took some energy, of course, and we split the flying time. I would say pretty close we were equal. In other words, we would take 10 or 15 minute shifts and switch from one to the other. And that was about all that you might want to take, because like I mentioned, it was strenuous work pulling that thing, particularly when you're flying in formation and you had to, of course, stay within the bounds of the formation.
Chapter 2, the flying characteristics of the B-17 Flying Fortress.
It was rather slow, rather cumbersome. In other words, you would turn the wheel and a few seconds later, that is the steering wheel, and a few seconds later the wing would come up. It wasn't anything at all like a fighter plane, but nevertheless it was stable. It made a good platform from which the bombardier could drop the bombs, and it withstood weather quite well, although we lost a lot of planes due to weather. It was well built, sturdy, and could take a reasonable punishment from anti-aircraft and German fighters.
Chapter 3, Flak.
Well, I think we've all seen pictures of flak and from various sources. It's a big puff of black smoke. And depending on where the target is, a well-defended factory, for example, there's literally hundreds and hundreds of flak guns there, or 88 millimeters mostly. And they were, well, at times they were so thick you felt you could actually walk on them. You had to fly through them. You couldn't dodge them. You had to fly through them and hope there were no more coming up while you were in that area. But normally the flak was out a ways. We had seen quite a few times when they were close by, and when you could hear the shell exploding. They were set for certain altitudes to explode, and you could hear them explode, and when they were real close you could see the red flash from the explosion. And I think we only did that several times, but when they're getting that close, you know they have you in their sights down there. But we try to, particularly on the days we flew as a lead crew, we tried to have the crew members on our ship keep us informed as to where the flak was coming up behind us, to the left at 3 o'clock or whatever. And then if it got too close, then we would move over to a little safer. We couldn't fly wherever we wanted to, but we did have a little leeway to try to keep away from it. You could hear the pinging, particularly if it was below you, because when the shell explodes, it tends to go up. But I would say within perhaps 100 yards, you start to feel maybe not lethal blows, but you start to feel the jagged particles of flak coming in. And sounds a little like rain on the roof, but not quite that regular.
Chapter 4, hit by flak and engulfed in fire.
The 88 shell went right through our number 2 engine and blew, of course, the whole thing out, and ruptured the gas lines and so forth, and the gas went down through the bomb bay then, and of course caught fire. And that's when we had the real trouble with the fire. And I guess we didn't really realize it had already spread back through the fuselage.
The order to bail out.
When Bill found that they could not put it out, he rang the alarm bell to bail out, and we proceeded to bail out at that point. The 3 good engines were running rough, seemed to me they were running away, increasing RPM. And I can remember I was jockeying the throttles, trying to get them back in synchronization. And I don't really know how much time elapsed there, but Bill reached over and saw I was still there, and he hit me on the shoulder and he said, "Get the hell out of here." So at that point I went back to the bomb bay, opened the door, tried to bail out through there, but it was full of fire. So I turned and came around and down a little passageway to the nose where the other hatch was. And I think there were 2 other fellows ahead of me. And eventually they got the door jettisoned from the nose hatch, and we went out 1, 2, 3 then. So to the best of our knowledge, 7 of us got out. There were 2 that were missing, and just until recently we hadn't heard anything from them, but we've been trying to find out what happened to them. And about a month ago, we think we finally got the final story of them. But we knew they were not in prison camp with us, but we didn't know what actually had happened.
Out of the aircraft and under the parachute.
I actually don't remember pulling the ripcord. I guess we were all in a very high state of excitement, and I don't remember. But I remember the fellow in front of me, right a little bit below me. I hollered at him, and he waved back. And at some point, I looked up, and I had holes in my chute, apparently from the flak, from that shell that hit us. So actually, our engineer and I came down close together because he had holes in his chute also. And I guess while we were still floating down, the most interesting thing was how quiet it got after the plane had gone on and eventually crashed. And all you hear was just the wind whistling around the parachute. But as we got closer to the ground, there was a German farmer plowing. This was in April, plowing with a single white horse. And at some point, he took off running toward the house. And we didn't know whether he was trying to call officials or what, but or to get a gun and take it to us. I don't know. But at any rate, that was the only thing I noticed on the way down. I didn't really notice any other chutes until our engineer and I came down together.
Chapter 5, American Airmen on German soil.
Well, we landed about 150 yards or so from woods, a forested area. And our first thought was to try to get over to the woods and a chance of escaping rather than open fields. And as we ran toward the woods, the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force people, came down alongside the woods. They saw what we were trying to do, and they cut us off. And we had no way of escaping. So we threw up our hands. I understand I didn't throw my hands up right away, and our engineer reached over and grabbed my hands and put them up. I think maybe I may have been under just a slight concussion yet or something, but that's how we happened to surrender.
Chapter 6, Prisoners of War.
We were taken into a small town of Fürstenfeldbruck, which is outside of Munich, by a single Luftwaffe soldier. He was very young, and it was probably about an hour and a half, 2-hour walk. And it's kind of an interesting thing now as we look back on those things. But he stopped to give us a rest, the engineer and I were walking, of course. And he wanted to know where we had come from, whether it was England or Italy, because American planes from both places were bombing Europe. And I would indicate that I didn't understand what he wanted. So he would put his hand down on the ground and make a sound like a motor, and then he would raise the hand up off the ground, and he would make the sound of anti-aircraft fire. Very plain to me. I knew what he was getting at. But I would shrug my shoulders and say, "Nichts verstehe, I don't understand what you're saying." Well, he did that 3 times, and I would each time say, "I don't understand." And then at the end of the 3rd time, he took out his P-38 pistol and stuck it in my belly, and he said, "England or Italy?" And I said, "England." They knew when we'd taken off, so I wasn't giving any secrets away. Their radar picked us up long before that. But anyhow, that was, I'll say, an interesting episode of being taken back, captured and taken back. And that night, of course, they put us in a civilian jail, a small cell. And the next day, a German officer, one at a time, interrogated us. And it was near the end of the war, and I think they were aware of that. And so they didn't have any strong arm tactics. He wanted to know where we came from, and I told him that a name, rank, and serial number, and he said, "I understand." And he went to a metal cabinet on the wall, took down a loose leaf binder, and he said, "Very well, if you won't tell me, I'll tell you." And he leafed through and came to the page that had all of our crew members on it, all of the crews of the whole 490th Bomb Group in there. He says, your commanding officer is Colonel Bostrom. So they had it all down in black and white, and they didn't pressure us to make any statements or anything. One thing that was interesting, it was, I guess it was about April 12th that President Roosevelt had died. And he brought that up. He wanted to know if I thought Cordell Hull, who was Secretary of State at that point, would become the new president. And I said, no. I said, the vice president will assume, which was Harry Truman. And the way he talked, he thought I detected that he felt Cordell Hull would make a good president, and maybe not be as hard on the Germans if they had to surrender. But after that, I guess it was a day or two later, one interesting aspect there, marching us at night, they put us in a small room for the night. This was after we left the civilian jail. And it's pitch dark, and I could feel that there were bodies laying on the floor. And I finally found a place that was not occupied and laid down and tried to sleep. But anyhow, in the morning, we got awake, and I found the whole floor was covered with prisoners, different had taken different place. One of whom was a Tuskegee airman, and he was flying his P-51 and was hit, and the engine was burning. And when he went to eject up through the front from his seat, of course the molten aluminum from the burning engine hit him in the face, and his face was all pockmarked, and it looked quite miserable. I've been sorry ever since. I never got his name. We weren't kept together very long, but we have met with other Tuskegee airmen and at reunions and so forth, and but I never could remember what happened to him. Could never find out what happened to him.
Chapter 7, Liberation by General Patton.
Well, we could hear the guns of Patton's his Fourth Army was coming in the distance. I would guess we could have heard them for 6-7 days before it got there. And each day it started getting louder and kept getting louder and louder. And finally on I believe it was a Sunday morning, the tanks came over a hill that was outside from the prison camp, and General Patton came in standing up in the back of his Jeep with his 2 pearl-handled pistols on his side, and ever the soldier. And of course, the tanks ran over the gates and broke them down, and that was it. We were free.
The whereabouts of their German captors.
Most of them had fled the camp. They left a small contingent back there to make the surrender. But apparently outside the camp there was a group of SS people, and they did put up a small fight. I guess they were probably all killed because I didn't see the results after that, but some of the prisoners who were at that point ex-prisoners said they had seen quite a few dead Germans laying out there. But the firefight didn't last but a very short time, and apparently that's who they were.
Chapter 8, the fate of their 2 missing crewmen.
We had been trying for a number of years, writing to different Air Force agencies, trying to get records as to what they knew about 2 of our crew members. And finally we wrote to the one in Virginia, which is Air Force Records Center, and got, first of all, they said that they acknowledged getting my letter, and said it comes under the Freedom of Information Act, and it'll take 6 months to get you this material. Well, the very next week I got a packet from them with about pretty close to 100 photocopied pages showing exactly what happened to these 2 fellows that were missing. As far as we were concerned, we didn't know what happened to them for all those years. The one, Dean Smith, they had found him, and he was dead, and they buried him there at a military cemetery in Germany. And in 1949, he was sent back home, then, his body, for burial in his home state of Oklahoma. And the other one, our radio operator, we never did find out what happened to him. The Army finally gave up. They sent us pictures of his dental records and everything else, but they could never match him up with a body. So I think it was somewhere around 1953 they gave up the search for him. So up until a month ago, we didn't know really what happened to them. Of course, he had rang the bell, and we put it in a dive. In other words, we had reason to believe that everyone had gotten out. We didn't know whether anyone was wounded back there or not, and we had reason to believe that the fire was back in the fuselage too, so that we proceeded to bail out the 2 people in the front of the plane, nose of the plane, namely the navigator and the toggleier, were gone. So we had reason to believe that, and the flight engineer was gone. We had reason to believe that they had all gotten out. But when we finally got put back into the prison camp where the rest of the crew was, why the 2 crew members were still missing.
Chapter 9. The B-17's overall effectiveness as a war machine.
Well, I think it was probably the best bomber of its time. It could take a more severe punishment in getting the load to the target and getting the men back. I think there were other bombers, obviously, took twin engines, the Mitchell B-25, the B-26, the A-20, the B-24. But I think the B-17 was able to sustain more damage and return, get its load delivered and returned than perhaps any of the others.
Chapter 10. Why Ray survived the war.
Well, I suppose the good Lord was with me a good bit of the way, and I think the fact that it was near the end of the war in relation to us being shot down and captured or perhaps mistreated as Gene was, I think it would be circumstances and equipment and so forth that we had available to us, and then someone from above was looking out for me.